I was riding my bike last weekend and stumbled across a garage sale and figured I would keep that in mind as I rode back. I figured I'd go ahead and finish the bike ride, and on the way back stop by and see what was going on, what the guy had for sale. And I came across this pressure washer and was asking questions about it. And he says, well, he's not actually the guy that's selling it. He's selling it for a neighbor. His neighbor saw him having a garage sale and figured he'd go ahead and add this to it, kind of like a consignment kind of thing, and wondered if he can get some money for it. So I talked to him, the garage sale guy, a little bit about it, and he said that he doesn't know much about it, doesn't have the owner's manual, but he told me to come back a little bit later and talk to the neighbor. And he says he thinks the neighbor wanted about $1.25 for it. I said okay, and figured that I'd go on home completing the bike ride, and that would give me some opportunity to do some research on this thing and put me in a better position to know what I'm getting into. And so I did, and did some research on it. Came back about 4 hours later, and at that time the neighbor was there, and we talked about it a little bit, and he said that the thing has never ran right. Even when it was brand new, he would start it up and he would always have to continuously play with the choke. He would basically have to run it with the choke half open, half closed, that kind of thing. So it's acting like it was leaning out, and he just got tired of it, because I asked him why he was selling it, and that's when he told me about the choke mechanism and everything and how he had to run it like that. He just got tired of doing that, went ahead and bought himself an electric one. He wasn't good at making carburetor adjustments or anything like that, and just wanted to see if he could just get rid of it and move on. So we talked about that, and I mentioned what might be wrong. And I pointed out some of the seals on the carburetor might be bad and that kind of thing. And I offered him $75 for it, and he went ahead and took it. So I've got a fairly new pressure washer here. It's got about 8 hours on it for about $75. I figured I can't really go wrong. The Honda engine on this thing alone is worth more than that if it's in good shape. My first time I went down there, I actually tried to pull it real slowly just to see if I had good compression, and I do. Compression's real good, so I know the engine can't be in that bad a shape. And I also looked at the oil, see what kind of shape that oil was in, and the oil looks very good. Not all black and nasty looking. So I knew that I was doing alright, if nothing else, just for the engine alone. The research I've done on these things, unfortunately, is not very flattering of the Husky brand, but that's okay. What seems to go wrong with these, and it's anybody's guess whether this thing suffers from that same problem, is the pumps under here go bad. Seems like the pistons in there may be plastic, and they just wear out, and the thing will run and just not have any pressure coming out of it. So I can't really test that, obviously, without the engine running, and that was one of the reasons why he came down on his price, because I don't really know what I'm getting into. I don't know if I can rebuild the pump, or if I can replace the pump, or even if the pump needs work at all. I'm just not going to know until I can get the engine running. So what he did was he tried to get it started with starting fluid, and it did pop, so I know the ignition's okay. And I'll try to do that here. Make sure the choke is open. You can see what that choke does. It opens and closes a butterfly valve right there. So we'll go ahead and spray some Go Juice in there and see if this thing's going to at least pop for me. And that's exactly what it did at the garage sale. Carburetor, I think, is basically all gummed up. He said it was sitting for a long time. It's got the old gas in there. He forgot to run the engine with the valve closed to purge all the gas out of here. And if you can see, of course I can't get this big camera in there. That fuel bowl, I mean, it's kind of crusty. Got gasoline coming out of it, actually. So what I'm going to have to do is take off the air box here and take off that carburetor right there, which shouldn't be too hard. Disassemble it and hopefully clean it up, or be able to clean it up, and then reuse some of the gaskets. I don't have any spare parts for Honda engines with me. I don't even have a service manual for it. I'm just going to kind of go by feel, so to speak, and do some basic cleaning and troubleshooting. Take all the carburetor parts out, run a stiff wire through them, make sure there's no crud in there, and just see if I can get the engine running at a basic level to assess how this thing is going to run, and also see if this pump works. And what I think I might do, if I get the engine running, is just take the pump off. That way it'll let me run the engine without the pump, because I'm not sure about these, but it wouldn't surprise me if I need water in there for lubrication. So I wouldn't want to run that pump dry until I know exactly what I have. And that'll let me run the engine and kind of do like a secondary break-in, so to speak. So this thing is hopefully going to be pretty nice for me. I mean, it comes with all the attachments and everything. It only has about 8 hours of use on it. It's not too bad. If I can get it running for $75 and maybe, you know, 20 bucks in parts perhaps, it'd make a good little pressure washer. I've been in the market for a pressure washer for about 2 years now, because this side of the house, the north facing side of the house, gets this algae on it, or, you know, this green stuff, and I think that the pressure washer would, plus the fact that you can have a little bit of soap in here or a little bit of bleach, would make really short work of just cleaning all that stuff off of here, especially at heights all the way up there, and make the house look real good. So let me get to work on this, get the air box off, get the carburetor off, and see what I've got. I know the engine basically is okay, compression's good, the ignition's good, spark plug is good because it just lit off a little bit and tried to run. So I'm confident that the problem's going to be in the fuel system there. Gas is probably about maybe 1.5 years old. Well, I finally got the carburetor apart. It's just a matter of loosening the screws that go to the air cleaner. And these are the long type of screws that hold the air cleaner and the carburetor on. So it just goes directly in there like that. And then of course you take off your governor, lever, and spring assembly off of here, as well as the choke. They just kind of work their way in here and turn them and they'll come out. And looking at the data plate on this thing, it's getting kind of hard to read, but looks like it was made in 2008. May sometime in 2008. So this thing's not that old. And in just 6 years, this is what I found inside the carburetor. that good old ethanol gas. Absorbs water. And the fuel bowl looks pretty dirty considering how old it is. There's lots of contamination in there, lots of corrosion. And my guess is that's worked its way up into the carburetor. The gasoline looks pretty bad. Should be almost clear like water, and it's already turning brown. So this gasoline is pretty old. And my guess is that since you can see the discoloration on the tube here, right around that line there where the gasoline was sitting most of the time, my guess is some of that contamination got up in there in that main jet right down there in the middle and clogged some passages. So I'm going to take a flat blade screwdriver and unscrew that jet, and that should allow me to push down. I don't know if you can see, but there's a little tube in there. I can push that down, work that on out of there, and then of course take out the needle seat assembly. That's pretty straightforward. That just comes out like this. And it just lifts right out. Just be careful not to drop the seat there. You want to make sure that the end of the valve there is nice and sharp. Yeah, that's better. It's got a little bit of wear on there for not being that old, but otherwise looks okay. And some of the stains on this napkin basically are what's been coming out of that carburetor, so it's pretty nasty stuff. I'm not sure. The guy told me he used it a couple of times and then put it in the garage and forgot about it. Just got tired of messing with it. So we'll go ahead and tear this carburetor down as much as we can. Soak it in some carburetor cleaner. I don't have any replacement gaskets, unfortunately. Some of these gaskets have deteriorated and left parts of themselves onto the intake manifold here, as well as carburetor base, but I think they'll be in good enough shape to let the engine run, just for testing purposes. And to my surprise, there's actually not a lot of adjustments on here, if any. This looks like the idle speed adjustment right there. It's just a matter of bending this tab in and out to control the opening of the throttle. So that's wide open throttle right there. That's closed throttle. You can see all the tiny passages in there. As this thing tries to open up, it exposes more and more of these orifices. So one or more of those might be clogged. I'm not really sure. I have to get a piano wire or something like that in there and see if I can force any goop out of it. But there's not much on this thing to take apart. There's one screw there. Not sure what that does yet. Basically just one screw, and then the main jet down in there. And that's basically it. We'll soak it in some carburetor cleaner and everything, break all this crud loose, and see what we have to work with. Okay, that wasn't too bad. I got the main jet out of there. You can see just how small that orifice is. And then internally it goes just like that. This main tube here goes through the center here, and you saw it kind of popping out where the throttle is. You can kind of see the hole there. This is actually where the fuel air mixture comes out, and you have all these air bleeds built into it. And it's pretty dirty. stands up in the carburetor just like this, vertically. So I'm going to run some wire through all these holes, and then clean this carburetor as best I can. I've got a little pail of carburetor solution I can just dump the entire thing in. I took out the screw that goes in right here, and it looks like it just covers up a press fit orifice of some kind for those holes right there. So I don't know if there's any way to get that out without damaging it. Probably not necessary. Just they'll probably clean up pretty nicely just soaking it in carburetor cleaner. And I don't see any other plastic parts in here except the choke. That's a little bit concerning because the carburetor cleaner may deteriorate this plastic, and unfortunately the whole shaft looks like it's plastic, not just the top. So I'm going to see if I can get that entire thing off of there. It doesn't look like I can because that butterfly valve looks like it's staked on there at the factory. That'd be pretty difficult to remove without damaging it to the point where you couldn't get it back on. So I may be stuck with another option of just using spray carburetor cleaner at some of these passages, and then some piano wire, and then some compressed air. If I had my choice though, I'd rather soak the entire thing in carburetor cleaner for several hours and let that chemical really act on all this crud, but this gasket here feels kind of hard. It may be by design. That's not easily coming out, and I don't want to take a chance on damaging it with the chemicals, so it looks like the spray cleaner, as well as maybe some steel wool on this, some mechanical action, might be my best choice. Okay, I got the carburetor as clean as I'm going to be able to get it. The fuel bowl cleaned up pretty good with just the carburetor cleaner. It's actually fairly smooth in there, and most of the corrosion is gone, which is really a shame that they didn't take better care of this thing, because the older Hondas just, you had to remove the whole fuel bowl to drain it, but the newer ones looks like they put this nice drain plug here. It's like draining your oil on your car. You just take this screw out. Well, you run the engine with the fuel cutoff on, so all the gas burns out, and then what's left in the fuel bowl, you just take this off and drain it out, and you're good to go for the season. Looks like they didn't do that, obviously. Carburetor's all put back together. Got that main jet all screwed back in there, and you can see the little metering jet right there in the center. That was that long tube we took out earlier with all those holes in it. That's all put back together. And to clean all the passages, what I had to do actually is take a piece of wire, strip off the end of it, just regular stranded wire, and then just use one strand that I have right here and a pair of needle nose pliers, and just work it in through all the passages. And believe it or not, even that was too big for that orifice right in here. So I was able to spray some carburetor cleaner in there and blow some compressed air through it and get it clean enough. I could see light through it, but it's amazing how small these passages are. I went ahead and took the opportunity to turn this valve back on and drain most of the gas. And that gas is pretty nasty looking. It's supposed to be fairly clear, almost like water, maybe a slight brown, maybe a color like brake fluid. This stuff is pretty bad. I'm not even sure if a good engine can run on that. Maybe a fuel injected engine can, but certainly not a carbureted engine. So that's pretty nasty stuff, and that's more than likely why the engine's not running good. So I'll finish draining the rest of the gas out of here, put some fresh gas in it, put this carburetor back together, and see if she's going to run. Well guys, here's the moment of truth. I got the carburetor all put back together and everything reassembled with the air cleaner box and everything. Got the ignition on, and I've got some cold water going through the water pump there, just in case it needs that for lubrication. And then the wand sitting over there in the grass. So I think I'm pretty confident that I can go ahead and start this thing up. And of course I've got some fresh gas in the gas tank after all the old crappy stuff was drained out. So let's see if this thing starts up, and if it does, if it runs good. Well, that's successful, but I'm a little bit worried that the problem the guy described earlier about it not running without the choke on might still be with me. Real quick, I'm going to check that water pump and see if I have any high pressure. And of course there's nothing, so it looks like the water pump on that thing is shut. I knew that might be an issue from the research I did on the internet with these things. The water pump lasts like, I don't know, 20 minutes when these things are new and it fails. That's not going to be too hard to rebuild or replace. They're about $100. And let's see if I can take this thing off the choke. Yeah, it's running extremely lean, which is why I've got to have the choke full on. So there's definitely something else going on. Probably leaking intake gaskets perhaps, or obstruction in the fuel line. But anyway, I'm a lot farther along with this thing than I was before I started. I'm going to go ahead and let it run like this, and maybe change the oil, let it warm up, and kind of go from there. Next video will probably be what it takes to get into this pump and get the pump working, as well as find out exactly why that thing is running so lean. But so far so good.